So today, though, we are going to be talking about bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Just looking at these words, what do you think they mean? What does bio mean? I've talked about the etymology of that word before. What does bio mean? Come on, you guys know this? Bio does not mean more than one. It means life, right? Biology, ology is the study of, so it's the study of life. Bio life, accumulation. What does it mean to accumulate something? Yeah, there we go, Cooper. It means to like collect, right? So here we're talking about things that collect in living organisms. Now, biomagnification, if I magnify something, what am I doing? Making it bigger? Zooming in. In this case, we are magnifying the effect. So biomagnification is going to be the increase in this substance as we move up the food chain. So, first off, let's talk about things that can bioaccumulate. To do that, we have to distinguish between a couple compounds. The first is poisons. What are poisons? What are poisons? Well, why is like drinking the bleach under your sink a bad idea? Because it will kill you, right? So poisons, in general, are substances that cause damage to organisms. Now, people often confuse the words poison and toxin. Toxins are substances that are poisonous. They do damage to living things. But toxins are produced by living organisms. So some examples of poisons in your home are drain cleaner, gasoline, battery acid. Does anybody have an example of a toxin? Something produced by a living thing? I'll give you an example. Does anybody know what people inject into their faces to get rid of wrinkles? Botox. You are injecting the deadliest toxin on Earth into your face. Seriously. It's produced by a bacteria, Clostridium botulinum. And this bacteria, back in the day, people would die from this bacteria quite often if they would eat canned goods that had gone bad, right? They're all bloated and ready to explode. I don't know how they died. It must have tasted disgusting. However, this toxin is so deadly that 1 gram of botulinum toxin can kill like 1 million people, give or take a bit. So it is by far the deadliest toxin ever produced by any living organism on our planet, and we inject it into our faces to get rid of wrinkles. It paralyzes muscles is what it does. So if you were to ingest botulinum toxin, you would actually paralyze the muscles in your body. You paralyze your diaphragm, intercostal muscles. You would stop breathing and you would die. So if you're going to get Botox, don't get it done in like a back alley somewhere. That could end very badly for you. Alright, so what are biodegradable and non-biodegradable substances? Because traditionally, things that bioaccumulate aren't things that get broken down. So if something is biodegradable, that means it's naturally broken down in our environment. So dead organisms, fecal matter, wood, lignins, whatever. Take your pick. Things that have typically evolved naturally on our planet, substances that have, organic substances that have naturally evolved, they tend to be biodegradable. Synthetic substances that we have created, some are biodegradable, but a large portion of them are non-biodegradable. Like plastic, for example. We can recycle certain plastics, but most plastics are going to be pollutants for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They're non-biodegradable. There has been a lot of interesting work done in this area, though, to make biodegradable plastics, because obviously, what's happening to our oceans? Is there a lot of plastic in our oceans? Yeah, there is, right? There's plastic everywhere. If our civilization ever collapses, one day, maybe humans will start digging, and archaeologists of a future era, and they'll find this weird layer of plastic around the entire globe. Our footprint left on our Earth. Now, we talked about these words already. Bioaccumulation is where life accumulates a substance. Biomagnification is going to be where up a food chain that substance will magnify. The amount of that substance will increase from trophic level to trophic level. So bioaccumulation, it's accumulation of a pollutant substance within an organism. I see a lot of you frantically trying to write all of this down. Keep in mind this PowerPoint is on my website. I prefer you just listen right now as opposed to frantically writing things down. Now, if you want to write down one of the examples I give or something, that could be fruitful. So bioaccumulation is the accumulation of a pollutant substance within an organism. And this occurs when the pollutant is absorbed by the organism faster than it is lost. And traditionally, these are substances that are not biodegradable. And for example, grass absorbing pesticides over time. But there are many examples of this. What's the concern if you are pregnant, for example, and around eating seafood? Oh, no one knows. We'll get there in a second. So, biomagnification, also called bioamplification, by the way. You may see that word used instead on your exam. Actually, no, sorry, there is no equal on your exam. But bioamplification is another way to describe this. And this is the result of bioaccumulation, where a pollutant substance becomes more concentrated the further up the food chain you go. Now, this was a huge issue when it came to DDT. Has anyone here heard of DDT before? What was DDT? Sorry? Somewhere in there? DDT was a pesticide, a very, very effective pesticide, used ubiquitously around the world. But in North America, we started to notice something happening. We started to notice that our birds of prey were all dying off. Now, it wasn't until a very famous book, now the title's eluding me. Is it The Summer of Silence? Could have been The Summer of Silence. The title's eluding me, but there was this book that linked DDT to this decline in birds of prey. Now, the substance DDT was tested pretty thoroughly in the sense that we tested in laboratory settings and we said, okay, well, this is the active concentration you'd find in the environment. Let's see if it has any effects. And we didn't really find it had any effects. We thought it was really safe to use. However, this was an organic pollutant that, yes, you know, in the waterways where all this runoff, all this pesticide eventually found its way into our waters, the levels of DDT were very, very low. But it did bioaccumulate within, you know, phytoplankton, within the very small organisms in your ecosystem. Then those were eaten by smaller fish. They were eaten by smaller fish, and then those smaller fish were eaten by bigger fish, and then those bigger fish were eaten by birds, and those birds were eaten by large birds of prey. Now, we found in those birds of prey extremely high levels of DDT. Hundreds or thousands of fold higher than what was found in the water. Now, why did this happen? Well, let's use an example here, a food chain here, an aquatic food chain, that helps illustrate this point. So, algae is eaten by shrimp. Now, how much algae does a shrimp need to eat? What was that rule we talked about? Why is it easier to feed the world if everyone was vegan, for example? Eating just plants as opposed to plants and animals. Cooper?
Because they absorb like 90% of the energy?
No. They lose 90% of the energy. So whatever you eat, the majority of that energy is being utilized to maintain the body of that organism, right?
That's what I meant.
I know. And then only a small percentage of that is stored as new growth, right? So when we're looking at an ecosystem, this shrimp needs to eat a lot of that algae. And as a result, it's going to keep all of the pollutants, right? It's not like it only keeps 10% of the pollutants. It keeps all of the pollutants that were found in that algae. So you have this amplifying effect with each stage up your food chain. Because your Arctic cod, is it going to have to eat a lot of that trophic level below it? Yeah, right? It's not like every shrimp it eats, 100% of that energy is being converted to new Arctic cod tissue. Most of that energy is being lost. So again, it's going to eat a ton of shrimp, and as a result, again, that pollutant substance is going to concentrate even more in the Arctic cod. And then even more in the ring seal, and even more in the polar bear. Now, this is the main reason why, when you are consuming, in particular, fish, because in general, what type of animals do we consume? When it comes to terrestrial animals, do we consume carnivores or do we consume herbivores? For the most part. Yeah, if we're eating mammals, we're eating herbivores, right? Pigs and cows. Pigs are more omnivorous, but we mainly feed them plant material. Chickens are a bit of both, but the reality is the lower down you can eat on the trophic pyramid, the less pollutants you are going to ingest. Which is why it's way safer, for example, to eat like sardines as opposed to marlin or bluefin tuna. Right? These top predators in the ocean, they're going to have much greater concentrations of organic pollutants because they're higher up on the trophic pyramid. So let's look at a quick example here. Well, this is a good example here of mercury and mercury in our oceans. Yes, in small fish the levels are extremely low, but as you get to those higher trophic levels, the levels of methylmercury become dangerous enough where you're not supposed to eat swordfish, for example, if you're pregnant, because it can affect the development of your fetus. So if you want to avoid mercury, you need to eat those smaller fish species. There'd be less mercury within them. And this goes for terrestrial ecosystems as well, obviously. Alright, so DDT. I've already talked about this, but it was a pesticide used in 1948 to 1972. Seemingly harmless at first. They used it everywhere. Literally, trucks would be driving through neighborhoods and spraying DDT, and the kids are playing outside, and they're just eating a cloud of DDT to the face. And there's a bunch of infomercials back in the day. At the end of class, if we have time, we might watch one. They're hilarious. These pro-DDT commercials were ridiculous. But they used it for everything. Because it was an extremely effective way to kill bugs, to kill mosquitoes. Now, we started to notice the effects of DDT in our environment in the high trophic levels, in particular our predatory birds. So in our waterways, we found very low concentrations, right? And at these concentrations, the concentrations they tested DDT at, there is no negative effects to hawks and eagles. But what happened was, this DDT bioaccumulated up the food chain, biomagnified up the food chain, to the point where we found large concentrations of DDT in our top predators, within our birds of prey. If you're wondering what ppm means, does anyone know what that is, by the way? That's parts per million. So in the million particles, you would find 13.8 particles of DDT. It's just a way to measure concentration, so how much of something is in a given volume. Now, what happened was, these birds of prey, their eggshells were too soft because of this DDT, so they often wouldn't make it to the point where they would hatch. These eggs would often break before then, and obviously then the birds aren't reproducing and the population crashes. So this was a big, big issue which led to the complete banning of DDT. Silent Spring is the book. So to answer that question, farm fish come with their own set of issues. We use a huge amount of antibiotics on them. And they actually decrease the populations of fish in the wild, which sounds crazy, but since they're so confined in these disgusting pens, they're full of sea lice, and they're often at the mouths of rivers where salmon would naturally run. Right now in BC, they're actually trying to ban fish farms on many, many parts of the coast because it's harming the wild populations of salmon, right? Salmon swim up these rivers, they lay their eggs, and then they hatch, and then these little fries swim down the rivers and into the ocean, but they can't handle the sea lice that's present there, and they're just being killed off. So fish farms, no bueno when it comes to ocean sustainability. Also, they have extremely high levels of mercury because guess what they're feeding these fish? There's a reason why we kill 1 to 2.5 trillion fish every year. Again, the number's so huge because most of the fish we harvest is going towards feed for fish farms and for terrestrial farms. So, anyway, so mercury in a fish is a big issue, but there are other organic pollutants that are present that we're going to talk about just a little bit. So, mercury is one of the most toxic substances. If you have an organomercury compound, they're so deadly that if you have the right organomercury compound, just touching it can kill you. Literally can absorb through your skin and kill you. But don't be super concerned about that. You only really find those in lab settings. Now, if water plants and small organisms take up this mercury, then it's going to move through the food chain and accumulate and magnify as we go up each trophic level. Now, methylmercury can cross the blood-brain barrier and can affect the developing fetus. Has anyone here ever heard of Mad Hatters before? Alice in Wonderland? No? Kind of. So, the reason why we call them Mad Hatters, do you guys actually know where that comes from?
Isn't there like lead in the hats? No.
Not lead.
Oh.
What do you think's in the hat?
Oh, mercury.
Yeah, so to treat like beaver skin caps, for example, they used to use mercury, and it helped like smooth the fur or something or make it more supple, these hats. But the people that made these hats, working with mercury all day, they developed, obviously they had high levels of mercury in their blood, so they developed neurological disorders, hence why the Mad Hatter part. You do not want to expose yourself to mercury on a regular basis, in particular mercury fumes. Elemental mercury is not super dangerous unless you're like breathing in vaporized mercury. But mercury is dangerous enough where we no longer are supposed to be using those thermometers within schools. We use alcohol-based thermometers now. Again, mercury can magnify up a food chain, and if we are eating high trophic level animals, like marlin, like big predatory fish, they do have very high concentrations of methylmercury. Another organic pollutant that is biomagnifying up food chains is PCBs. Now, PCBs are excellent for a lot of electrical componentry. They have really good properties when it comes to like making giant transformers and stuff like that. But the issue is they are, again, a pretty carcinogenic organic pollutant. And we are finding higher and higher levels of PCBs in many of our food products. Again, due to this biomagnification process. There are other substances of concern. I think they're called OHPs. But there's a huge class of compounds as well that are common industrial pollutants that are accumulating up food chains. Anyone have any questions at all? Alright, so anyone want to take a stab at describing how, for example, DDT killed off birds of prey? Why does a pollutant amplify as it moves up a food chain? Yep, you want?
Because like the first level, they don't have like that much DET, but as it goes up, like the next level,
Yep.
animals eat them because the DET gets higher and higher every time. It goes up the food chain, so then at the top of the food chain has the most DET.
Yeah, exactly. So why is it though that it increases so much every trophic level? Think of what's the 10% rule? Yep.
Because they have to eat a lot of whatever they're eating in order to gain the energy, but they get all of the mercury, or DET, sorry.
Yeah, they're going to eat a lot of that trophic level below them because the majority of that energy is being utilized to just, maintain their bodies, for body temp, for repairing tissues. Some of it's lost in waste. A very small percentage, approximately 10% is what we say, gets stored as new growth. But they get 100% of the pollutants in what they eat. So you have this phenomenon where you're eating a ton of the trophic level below you, and you're getting all of the pollutants, so it's concentrating with every single step up your trophic pyramid. Okay, so it's very important that you do understand the process of bioaccumulation and biomagnification for your test. Any other questions?